You're listening to the North American Soccer Network, online at NASN.TV.
This is John Strong. You're listening to Soccer Made in Portland.
Welcome Timbers owner and president, Merritt Paulson.
This might take away your Merritt Paulson tweets segment.
No, we already did it. Merritt Paulson. An interview that we did with Kenny Cooper.
Thanks so much. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for the kind words.
Jim Rylett, he is the Timbers U23 coach.
For whatever reason, you have Kelly there because he's really not very good at what he does.
Opinions, yes. Factual information, that remains to be seen.
That's never stopped us before.
Good morning and welcome to Soccer Made in Portland on this belated Wednesday edition of the show. This is Mao speaking. Kelly McLean is back from the bus stop. Kelly, how you doing?
Quite well. Enjoying a little break in the rain. It was nice to have the rain back for a couple days, I must say. But it is kind of nice now to have a little break in it. Yeah.
It was a nice little tease. There's more coming. Obviously, I think that by this weekend it's supposed to be pretty crappy weather.
Which it feels like fall, though. I kind of like fall.
It does for the first time. Really, it's cool and crisp at night and in the mornings. It feels good. It'll be nice once there's that one more Timbers game. It'll actually feel like fall at the game. And speaking of which, the Timbers only have 10 days left in the season. The season finale is 10 days from today against San Jose. Obviously, we'll have more to say about that particular game next week. The moment, we are kind of in a weird spot in between games where there was a 2-week break between the Seattle game, which we kind of talked about a lot last week, and the Vancouver game, which is coming up on Sunday. Gavin Wilkinson not really around very much last week, or not around at all, and wasn't available to the media on Monday. So it actually ended up being 9 days in between opportunities to kind of hear something from Gavin on the state of the Timbers. So that's what we're going to mainly talk about today on this shortened show. It sort of set the stage for kind of what the Timbers are thinking and maybe some ideas of who may be playing or who may be on the outs a little bit between now and Sunday. And then on Friday, we'll come back and properly preview the game with a little bit, hopefully more info on injury updates and not just from Portland side, but from Vancouver's as well. Quick update, or quick note on show details. Make sure you go to NASN.TV just to get all of our archive shows. For those wondering, we did not do a show on Friday. There just honestly wasn't enough to talk about to justify doing a show, not enough different from what we talked about last Tuesday. But you can go there anyway and get all of the shows that did happen via iTunes or RSS, whichever you like. Be sure to check us out on NASNPortland.com as well. So let's kind of go back a little bit to the Seattle game. Gavin addressed a little bit yesterday at training, sort of addressed what was going to be sort of similar about the Vancouver game, which is another game where the Timbers have a chance to win the Cascadia Cup. Now, this is the last chance, very obviously, and but there's still sort of that question of how do you balance the need or the desire to win this cup and get something tangible out of this season, and evaluating players in quotes or whatever, or capital letters, doesn't matter. Looking at players, giving Caleb Porter as much visual information as possible. How do you strike that balance in a game that, unlike the Seattle game, is the last chance? There is no more, well, we'd love to do it today, but if we don't, we've always got the next game where we can still wrap it up. This is the end of the line for that, and a draw now doesn't even get it done because of goal difference. So we've got kind of a long quote here, but I'm curious to hear what you think the approach will be, whether we'll hear more about evaluating players or if it's going to be just an all-out effort to just win the game completely independent of the larger picture.
Well, you asked what's the balance? How do you balance that? I don't think you do. I mean, I'm surprised that there's still this notion in some of the comments from Gavin back from the Seattle game that they were, maybe it was only one player, maybe it was only two players, but that they were still somehow, like you said, trying to find some balance between evaluating players or providing something for Porter to look at and winning the game. I don't know. It seems odd to me that with the season the way it's been and the chances that you still have left to win the Cascadia Cup, to salvage something, to sort of temper a fan base that is obviously not happy, I'm surprised that you do try to strike a balance in any way. Now, it sounds as though in Vancouver, they're really not going to strike a balance between the two. I mean, the comment, at least what we've heard just yesterday from Wilkinson, is that they're just going to go all out to win the game. I'm still just a little bit miffed that wasn't the approach in Seattle, to be honest with you. I mean, I get it. I mean, we've been talking about it for months, that idea of balancing that and looking at some guys. And Porter wants to see Rodney Wallace as a center midfielder instead of putting Eric Alexander in there. All right, fine, whatever. I'm fine with it. Go for it. But gosh, I just don't know when it comes down to Seattle and Vancouver and such a good opportunity to win the Cascadia Cup that you even have that discussion. But I mean, I suppose anything's up for debate, and you know, their job is a lot harder than a couple of guys is sitting in the stands or, you know, doing a podcast can really kind of fathom. They're considering a whole lot more things than we are. But I mean, I like to think of myself as somebody who's pretty capable of being objective and seeing things from everybody's perspective. But I'm still having a little bit of trouble seeing how in that Seattle game, like I said, even if it were just one or two players, how you would still try to do any of that. Well, let's take a look at this type of stuff. So I don't know. I'm still a little miffed by the whole thing.
Yeah, and I still contend that the biggest mistake was simply saying so, not. Yeah,
he came back out yesterday and reiterated it, which I was lock, stock, and barrel with you last week. It was like, yeah, I can see how somebody could come out and just start saying after this devastating loss and just kind of repeat the same stuff they've been repeating. But then it was just sort of backed up again yesterday. And so, yeah.
Well, here's the full quote from Gavin on that question that I asked about that balance. It's a little bit of a long one, so bear with me, but it does kind of answer or address a couple of different topics. And so here it is. It's a constant communication with Caleb Porter. With that, everything's a balance. We've still got to put a team out there that there's a belief in the coaching staff and from Caleb and myself that can win. That's kind of a strangely worded sentence, but there it is. There are one or two decisions that may be questioned. Rodney Wallace starting at left back. He had done well against Seattle previously. We had Stephen Smith, who was suffering from tight hamstrings. So there's that. There's his answer for that again. But coming to the Vancouver game, it's the best 11 players that are fit and healthy. We've got to make some late decisions on the players that are coming back from international duty, meaning Rodney Wallace and LaBelle Palmer. Steve Purdy is also coming back from international duty, but I don't think he's part of that equation. We've had some good performances yesterday at training, Monday, and today, Tuesday, out of some players that we're expecting big things from. I think if we go into Vancouver and everyone plays how they're capable, it's going to be a very, very interesting game. That's one of the things we lacked in Seattle. We didn't have players that stood up and played one of the best games of the season. We had a couple of players that we've come to rely on that possibly didn't contribute as much, but that's par for the course over a long season. So, I mean, he definitely still says that, yeah, they were looking at things and they're trying to give Caleb, video evidence of as much as possible. But to me, that kind of steps it back a little bit from sort of what he said in Seattle. Because, I mean, and like we talked about last Tuesday, if you look at the players who actually played, the front six were identical to what you'd expect. And Donovan Ricketts came back. I don't think anybody had any major qualms about that. David Horst played, and Futty Danso played because Onyar Mosquera was hurt. So you're really only looking at the outside backs. Rodney Wallace, maybe you don't like the decision, but there's at least a reason. There's sort of two reasons. He had done well in the last game against Seattle at that position, and Stephen Smith wasn't going to be able to go 90 minutes given the condition of his hamstrings. So really the only place I can go there is Lavelle Palmer at right back instead of Kimura. And, I don't know that we've been given a great explanation as to why that was the case, other than giving a look. It does confuse me. I mean, at this point in the season, what more does Caleb Porter need to see out of Lavelle Palmer at right back? I mean, I think there's quite a lot of video of Lavelle Palmer at right back against different teams, against different systems and different players. So yeah, I think that I don't think we're going to see Lavelle Palmer starting on Sunday for a couple of reasons. But it was interesting to hear him sort of go back through all of that but then actually say it's the best 11 players that are fit and healthy who will be playing against Vancouver, which in my mind means there's going to be 3 changes. There's going to be Stephen Smith back at left back. There's going to be Kosuke Kimura back at right back, and Onyar Mosquera is going to start back at center back, and the rest of the team will be the same. And so I still just can't get past the idea that despite saying there was this level of experimentation, that there really just wasn't against Seattle. It still confuses me why bring it up, why describe it that way, other than just to keep with the consistency of what they've been saying for the last few months, in which every game is a chance to see something from someone. And I thought, to be fair, in another quote from last Sunday in Seattle, Gavin said, in essence, it wasn't just about trying guys in different positions. It was about seeing how guys perform on a certain stage. And so, I mean, I think you can evaluate the team. I mean, if the starting 11 is what I just indicated in Vancouver, it doesn't mean that they've only chosen to try and win the game instead of evaluate the players. It means they've put what I think most people would think is the best group for starting on the pitch, but they can also learn something about sort of the character of players, how they respond to different scenarios, different types of teams, different types of opponents, and that's valuable too. That's all useful. So I think it's kind of a lot of talk around these quotes, and I understand it because there's not been anything else going on, and there's been no other quotes in the 9-day period. I mean, there's been nothing else that's been said to have something else to talk about. So it makes a lot of sense. But I think based on kind of what we saw early this week in training, that we'll see those changes back to sort of what you call the expected 11, I guess, or a group that we've seen more in recent weeks and months than what we saw in Seattle.
Well, I'm wondering if we can't throw Futty into that mix too. And it doesn't always have to be just these two guys are both perfectly fit and healthy, and we're going to choose either the guy that is the regular starter or this guy simply because we want to see him in that situation. I mean, it could have been a situation where, look, Mosquera can go, but it is a bit risky. He is coming off an injury. He could get hurt. So maybe this is the little nudge that we were looking for. Maybe this is the opportunity that we were looking for. Caleb wants to see Futty because, like everybody knows, we've got a ton of center backs out there. So maybe this is what's going to make our decision for us. We'll hold out Mosquera, even though he could go. We'll hold him out. We'll give him another week of rest, and then we'll get a chance to see Futty. So I mean, maybe we can kind of throw Futty into that, like he wanted to see him or see how he would perform on this kind of a stage. I don't know if I agree with it, I think, like I said previous to that Seattle match, I think I would have put Mosquera in there. Even though we know he was coming back from an injury and there's going to be an increased chance that he could get injured again if he wasn't fully healthy, I think I still would have put him out there. And the quotes from Gavin yesterday, support that he could have played. He said that he was available for Seattle, but it's just not worth risking a player when you're going into a game and potentially subbing a defender out through injury, which I get. But again, I think you just have to put more of that value on that game and that cup and put your best 11 out there. But like I said, it could be a situation where, hey, we've got a reasonable, not excuse, we have a usable reason here to put Futty in. So do you want to look at Futty? Do you want to see what he does under this kind of pressure? This might be a chance, and we've got a valid reason to go with it. Okay, go ahead and do it.
Yeah, and we talked about that, how nobody was complaining ahead of the game that Futty was going to be in the starting lineup because he had played well against DC, coming on as a sub when Mosquera did get hurt. He had scored in Seattle last year. He'd scored on a penalty against Seattle in the USL era. He's the longest tenured Timbers player. I mean, he's a guy again, I think they learned a little bit, and Gavin said on Sunday or last Sunday, we learned a little bit of something about one or two players, and I would say Futty is one of those. I mean, he had a nightmare, and moving forward, I think it's instructive to realize where Futty was at practice yesterday, or not where he was, but with whom he was associated. The senior players, so-called senior players, were all practicing, and there was sort of a split. It was sort of a split practice. Most guys were on the field, and then some guys were in the gym, and then they switched after a certain point. And the guys on the field were sort of the guys you expect. I mean, the starting lineup guys, and guys like Alexander and Mwanga and Richards, and guys who have been in and out of the 18, guys who've been in and out of the lineup, guys who play, and the goalkeepers, etc. So, kind of looking around, trying to figure out who's out here. So that means who's in the gym. So, they finally come out of the gym right before they do this switch. And the guys who come out of the gym are Charles Rinkin, Sebastian Rincon, Ryan Kowalik, Freddie Braun, Jose Valencia, Andrew Jean-Baptiste, Cam Vickers, and Futty. Now, tell me, who doesn't belong on that list? There's two ways to look at it. There's the guys who are actually on the team, and then there's Cam Vickers, who's just kind of a guest guy, not a trialist necessarily. And then there's the other part where it's like guys who are like 23 and under and who aren't on senior player contracts, and Futty.
Right.
And I'm not going to say for sure it's punishment, but we didn't see Futty for a long time, and we didn't see him because of what he did against Dallas. In Dallas, the performance he gave there was one of the worst by an MLS Timbers player. I mean, there were a lot of guys who had a bad night that night, but that would rank pretty high up there. And the whole players quit thing, which was such a big deal at the time, I think he was one of those guys that was on that list if you wanted to make one. And we didn't see him at all until he came in and subbed for Mosquera against DC. He put in a good performance there, but then put in a shocking performance against Seattle. So, this is 2 weeks later. I mean, and he's not practiced. I mean, he literally didn't practice with the first team at all. I mean, even with subs, these are guys that he's with who only play in the reserve games. These are guys that are in that, when we made that differentiation, or when Gavin did that, we have to evaluate the players who make more money more because they're the ones that matter more as far as decision-making processes. Futty should be on that list because he's on a senior contract. His contract counts against the salary cap. He's the longest tenured Timbers player. Yet he's out there with teenagers and guys who aren't even on the team. It was a big sign to me. At the very least, he isn't going to be in the 18 on Sunday. I think we can expect Bruner to be in there instead of Futty, and it makes me wonder if we've seen the last of Futty. If that's the, I mean, at this point, if you want to find out more about guys, you at least stick him in the 18. If you're putting Futty out there with teenagers, you've already decided what what you're going to do, and presumably it isn't keep him. The sort of the way we've talked about Mwanga and Alexander. So that was stunning to me to see him out there. We've seen Steve Purdy with the same group before in previous practices, set aside from the rest of the team, practicing again with teenagers and guys who aren't on the team. And this is Futty in that group, and it's not good for Futty. I should say we've sort of talked about a couple of different guys, but both Kimura and Smith. The main reason I think they're going to play. First of all, Smith is healthy now, or is back to 100%, and so I think he'll be going. Kimura and Smith actually looked pretty good in practice over the last couple of days. Both of them ripping shots in these sort of small-sided games. Kimura in particular had a couple of really nice goals. Not that that's what the team is going to count on him for doing in Vancouver, but those guys, I'm sure, Kimura probably more even than Smith, because Smith at least had this hamstring thing, were probably embarrassed to not be included in the team when they've been the regular starters for months. And then were suddenly dropped with no explanation nobody knew ahead of the game that Smith had these hamstrings. So I think both of those guys are out with a point to prove that they belong in the starting lineup, that they belong in the team, and in the plans for next year and moving forward. So I think we'll see both of those guys start. They were looking pretty good. And to be totally honest, Bright DK looked really good in practice this first 2 days. They're off today, Wednesday, and then pick back up for Thursday, Friday, Saturday for practice. So we'll see how he looks later in the week. But I don't see any change in the lineup there. I mean, I think Mwanga will be in the 18, but I think DK's going to get a run out there. I mean, he's been playing well, and I think he'll be out there. So there is one other thing that we should address as we're kind of down to about 5 minutes left. And that is Kris Boyd. And you and I have talked about this off the air a lot, mostly in a joking fashion, but sort of suggesting, hey, what do you want to bet that we hear that Kris Boyd might be available for the San Jose game? He could be back by then. There's a chance he could be ready by then. What do you think the chances are? And we had to wait 9 days for the question to be asked, and the question was asked. And sure enough, Boyd has been working hard, and there is a chance he could be cleared for the San Jose game, which is well ahead of schedule. Boyd has not yet done anything with the team. He's been doing a lot of running and touch and ball work. And so, he's out there. I mean, he's not, in the training room, for the whole time anymore. But we had a feeling we might hear this, and sure enough, not a factor for this weekend. But what do you think about that?
We won't see him. No, I just don't. I think it's done. It's over. And I think this is just kind of the standard company line. Yeah, he could be available, and he might be, but I don't think we will see him. Nor do I.
And I also don't think we're going to see Khalif Al-Hassan. Gavin basically ruled that out. He was back to training, at full speed, full strength. But I think they don't have him. They don't think he's ready for 90 minutes yet. Gavin keeps saying things like, what we're asking of the players, we don't think Khalif can give that effort yet. That he's, he keeps having these knee things, and he could play, but can he play and play hard the whole game? I mean, part of that is you're talking about Khalif, but then the other part is, he's just not there yet, and so he could be in the subs, and possibly make an appearance, but I doubt very seriously we'll see a change in that front six at all.
Yeah, I don't think so. I expect we might see Khalif at some, in one of these last two games for an appearance, but yeah, and there's really no reason to start him over any of those other guys anyways. He'd have to be playing pretty well to get himself in front of that front six that's been there, I think, most of the time. Yeah. Anything else before we touch on a fantasy update? You went to practice Monday and Tuesday. Any other little nuggets or anything you saw out there?
Not really. I mean, guys are playing hard. I mean, it was, they took Monday and Tuesday off last week. Then they practiced Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then they took Saturday and Sunday off. And so they looked rested. They looked ready to go. I mean, most of the guys who have been hurt, Chara, Ricketts, Mosquera, Smith, guys who have had little knocks, Al-Hassan, they're all out there. They're all practicing. It's really only Boyd and Taylor and Ian Hogg who have sort of bigger injuries who are not out there. So it seems very spirited. It seems everyone's involved. We've said that before, and it doesn't necessarily translate into a road victory. But I think they're in as good a shape as they could be from sort of a mental standpoint as of now. But again, we'll see if that actually matters, and we'll talk about that more on Friday.
Just enough time to do a little fantasy update here. We've had a lengthy break. Mao currently in 23rd. I'm in 35th. Trevor somehow manages to hang on to the front page. He's in 44th, even though I don't think he's, as of yet, still made any changes in months. The top three has stayed the same, and they've kind of solidified themselves now. MD88 Keys in first. SLC, PTFC for the win in second, and Vanishing Point in third, and they've got a pretty lengthy gap above anybody below them, so I think they're going to stay there. The next round starts tonight, so make sure if you're going to make changes or alterations, go do that before Seattle and Salt Lake kick off. A lot being made about this match. Should be a good game. It's on NBC, the NBC Sports Network station, whatever that is. That starts at 7 Pacific. So that should be a good one to check out if you're able to watch.
Yes, indeed. So we'll be back on Friday afternoon at the regular time, 3:30 p.m. Pacific. And we will have a preview of the Vancouver game with injury updates and some stuff on Vancouver, see what the story is there. But in the intermediate time in between, only 2 days this time, enjoy the rest of the week. Enjoy the lack of rain during the last couple days before it probably starts and never ends. And we will be back Friday afternoon to speak with you then. So until then, this is Mal.
And this is Kelly. We'll see you on Friday.
Yep. Speak to you then.